I never thought the man who once slipped a ring on my finger would try to put handcuffs on my wrists. One minute I was a single mom balancing hospital shifts and parent-teacher notes. The next I was the debtor splashed across a courtroom whisper line. My ex-husband smiled like he'd already won, like my son and I were finally small enough to crush. But he didn't know my boy had been watching, quietly collecting breadcrumbs, saving screenshots, guarding a file no adult should ever need. When the judge asked for proof, my son stood up, and everything changed. The first time I heard the word fraud attached to my name, it was spoken by a man who used to kiss my forehead before work. We were standing in family court. My ex-husband Daniel wore a navy suit I had bought him for his promotion dinner 5 years ago. He looked polished, confident, victorious. I looked like a nurse who had just finished a double shift. Your Honor, Daniel said smoothly, my ex-wife accumulated over $380,000 in hidden debt during our marriage. Credit cards, personal loans, and she forged my signature on business lines of credit. The courtroom gasped softly. I froze. Forged his signature? I felt heat crawl up my neck. That's a lie, I said, my voice barely steady. Daniel didn't even look at me. He just placed a thick folder on the table. I have documentation. Documentation. My stomach dropped. Because 3 weeks earlier, the bank had frozen my personal account. My paycheck from the hospital had bounced. Our landlord had called me in front of my son, asking why the rent transfer had failed. And Daniel had stood in my doorway that night pretending to be concerned. I warned you about spending, Lena, he had said gently. You always had a weakness for nice things. Nice things? We had divorced 2 years ago because of his affair with his assistant. I walked away with nothing but my nursing job and custody of our 10-year-old son, Mason. Daniel kept the house. Daniel kept the company. Daniel kept the image. Now he wanted to keep my dignity too. Your Honor, his lawyer continued, the debt trails back 5 years. Mrs. Carter was listed as primary account holder on several high-risk investments. I stared at the documents from across the room. My signature. My name. My social security number. It looked real. Too real. The judge adjusted her glasses. Mrs. Carter, are you denying this evidence? Yes, I said firmly. Every word. Daniel finally turned toward me. His expression was almost pitying. You were overwhelmed after the pregnancy, he said quietly, as if he were helping me. You didn't always remember what you signed. Pregnancy. He brought that up. The miscarriage we never recovered from. The therapy I attended alone. The nights he stayed late at work. You don't get to rewrite my life, I snapped. The judge's gavel tapped. Order. Mason sat in the back row beside my best friend Carla. He wasn't supposed to miss school, but the notice from the court had terrified him. I caught his eyes. He looked confused. Scared. That broke me more than Daniel's lies. Daniel's lawyer slid another page forward. We also have bank surveillance showing Mrs. Carter accessing the branch on March 14th to open an extension line. March 14th. I was in the ICU that day. I remember because I held a dying woman's hand until her husband arrived. I was at work, I whispered. Daniel leaned closer. You can stop fighting, Lena. If you admit responsibility, I'll settle. I don't want Mason dragged into this. Dragged into this? He was the one dragging us. The judge reviewed the preliminary documents. Based on what I see, there is sufficient evidence to proceed with financial investigation. Temporary wage garnishment may apply. My ears rang. Wage garnishment. I barely paid rent. Carla squeezed Mason's shoulder. He looked down at something in his lap, his old tablet. I thought he was playing a game to distract himself. I was wrong. Daniel stood tall as if he'd just won a promotion. I never wanted it to come to this, he told the courtroom dramatically. You never wanted it to come to this. The same man who left me crying on the kitchen floor after I discovered hotel receipts in his briefcase. The same man who told his mistress I was emotionally unstable. He was building a narrative. And I was drowning in it. Outside the courtroom, reporters lingered. Daniel's company had made local headlines recently. He was known. Respected. I was just a nurse. Lena, Carla whispered when we stepped into the hallway. Something doesn't add up. No kidding, I muttered bitterly. Mason tugged on my sleeve. Mom. Not now, sweetheart. No, Mom. I need to tell you something. His voice wasn't scared anymore. It was serious. Daniel exited the courtroom with his lawyer. When he saw us talking, he smirked. That smirk. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was certainty. Like he had already secured the ending. Dad lied, Mason said quietly. I knelt to his level. Sweetheart, adults are handling this. No, he insisted. He lied. I heard him. My pulse quickened. When? Mason swallowed. Last month. When I was at his house. He was on the phone with someone from the bank. He said, make sure the transfers trace back to her login. The hallway noise faded. What? I whispered. Carla's eyes widened. He didn't see me, Mason continued. I was in the hallway. He said if the records showed your IP address, the judge wouldn't question it. IP address. Login. I stood slowly. Daniel had always controlled the finances. After our divorce, he insisted on handling old shared accounts to simplify paperwork. Had I ever changed those passwords? No, because I trusted him. You're sure? I asked Mason. He nodded. Anne, I saved something. My breath caught. Saved what? He looked toward the courtroom doors where the judge had disappeared. Proof. Before I could ask more, Daniel's lawyer approached. There will be a follow-up hearing in 10 days, he said smoothly. I suggest your client prepares to negotiate. Negotiate. Like I was guilty. Like I was desperate. Like I would break. Daniel stood behind him, hands in pockets, relaxed. Take the deal, Lena, he said softly. It's easier. Easier. For who? I looked at my son. He wasn't scared anymore. He was determined. And suddenly, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift inside me. Daniel thought he controlled the narrative. He thought he controlled the money. He thought he controlled me. But he forgot something. He forgot that our son had inherited more than his last name. He inherited my memory. And apparently, he had been watching. I didn't sleep the night before the second hearing. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because hope is more terrifying than fear. Fear prepares you to lose. Hope makes you imagine winning. Mason sat cross-legged on my living room floor, his tablet glowing in the dim light. Carla leaned over his shoulder, her expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. Show her again, she whispered. Mason tapped the screen. A voice recording filled the room. Daniel's voice. Clear. Calm. Make sure the transfers trace back to her login. Use the old credentials. She never changed them. My lungs stopped working. There was another voice, male, nervous. Sir, that could raise flags. It won't, Daniel replied smoothly. By the time anyone questions it, the debt will be attached to her name. Judges follow paperwork. Judges follow paperwork. I sat down slowly. How did you get this? I asked Mason. He looked guilty for half a second. Dad left his office computer unlocked. I was playing a game, and I saw the recording app open. I emailed it to myself. Carla exhaled sharply. Oh my God. There was more. Mason opened a folder labeled Bank Stuff. Inside were screenshots, transfer logs, IP addresses, timestamps. Every single fraudulent transaction originated from Daniel's office network. He hadn't just framed me. He'd engineered it. You saved all of this? I whispered. Mason nodded. I knew it was wrong. I pulled him into my arms and held him tighter than I ever had. You should never have had to do this, I said into his hair. But I did, he replied softly. The next morning, our lawyer, Miss Alvarez, stared at the files in stunned silence. This, she said carefully, is criminal. Daniel hadn't expected me to hire a forensic accountant. He hadn't expected his own son to outplay him. Court felt different that day. Daniel walked in confident as ever. His lawyer smiled politely at me. I didn't look away. The judge began reviewing preliminary findings. Mrs. Carter, she said, have you secured representation? Yes, Your Honor. Miss Alvarez stood. We would like to submit additional evidence. Daniel's posture shifted slightly. His lawyer frowned. Miss Alvarez connected Mason's tablet to the courtroom monitor. The audio played. The room fell silent. Daniel's voice echoed through the speakers. Use the old credentials. Daniel stood abruptly. This is illegal. That's private. The judge's gavel struck hard. Sit down. The second recording played, this time with clearer details about manipulating IP logs. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's face drained of color. This was obtained unlawfully, his lawyer argued. Miss Alvarez remained calm. It was saved by a minor in his father's home where no reasonable expectation of privacy was explained. Additionally, we have certified bank metadata proving the transactions originated from Mr. Carter's corporate network. The screen lit up with timestamps. IP matches. Geolocation data. Every lie collapsed in real time. Daniel looked at me. Not smug. Not confident. Afraid. The judge removed her glasses slowly. Mr. Carter, she said evenly, you accused this court of being misled by Mrs. Carter. It appears the opposite may be true. Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Forensic review confirms manipulation of account credentials, the judge continued. This court is referring this matter for criminal investigation. Criminal investigation. The same man who called me irresponsible now stood exposed as a fraud. His lawyer whispered urgently. Daniel shook his head, panic flashing in his eyes. And then it happened. He looked toward the back of the courtroom. Toward Mason. Our son. Mason stood up. Small. Steady. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He simply met his father's gaze. You said judges follow paperwork, Mason said quietly, his voice trembling but clear. So I brought the right paperwork. The room froze. Daniel's composure shattered. You ungrateful little, he started. Enough, the judge thundered. Security moved closer. In that moment, I saw the full truth. Daniel never loved control. He loved power. And power only works when no one challenges it. The judge finalized her decision. All allegations of debt against Mrs. Carter are dismissed effective immediately. Wage garnishment is revoked. Furthermore, this court will schedule a separate hearing regarding custody review. Custody review. Daniel went pale. The one thing he cared about more than money was image. And custody battles are public. He tried one last move. Lena, he said desperately, stepping toward me as we exited. We can fix this. I made mistakes. Mistakes? You tried to destroy my life, I replied calmly. I was angry, he insisted. You took Mason from me. I didn't take him, I said softly. You pushed him away. Carla stood beside me like armor. Miss Alvarez handed me official documentation clearing my name. The reporters outside turned their cameras toward Daniel this time. Mr. Carter, is it true you falsified financial records? He shielded his face. The same man who once thrived on public praise now hid from public truth. That night, Mason and I sat on the couch with takeout boxes balanced on our laps. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. You're my hero, I told him. He shook his head. You're mine. I smiled through tears. Carla knocked and stepped inside with a bottle of sparkling cider. To justice, she declared. We laughed. Softly. Freely. A week later, the hospital board called me into a meeting. Not to question me. To congratulate me. They had seen the news coverage. Integrity matters, the chief of staff said. We'd like to promote you to head nurse. Promotion. After humiliation. After nearly losing everything. Life has a strange way of balancing scales. 3 months later, the custody hearing granted Daniel supervised visitation only. His company board opened an internal investigation. He resigned quietly. No dramatic speech. No applause. Just silence. And one evening, as I tucked Mason into bed, he asked, "Do you think Dad hates me?" I brushed his hair back gently. "No," I said honestly. "I think he hates losing." Mason nodded thoughtfully. "Good," he whispered. "Because we won." I turned off the light and stepped into the hallway. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Ryan Patel, the quiet surgeon who had stood by me during the worst weeks at the hospital. "Dinner tomorrow?" "No courtrooms. Just peace." I smiled. For the first time in years, my future didn't feel like survival. It felt like possibility. Daniel thought paperwork would bury me. He forgot something. Truth leaves a paper trail too. And sometimes, it's carried into court by a 10-year-old boy who refuses to let his mother fall.